From Agatha Christie to Clue, everybody loves a good whodunit mystery with a surprise ending. But sometimes, truth is even stranger than fiction. In this video, we will discuss true crime cases with a supernatural twist. Let's dive in. Number 6. What happened to the Setagaya family? Within the confines of their home in Setagaya, Tokyo, on December 30, 2000, 2 children and their parents were brutally killed. Haruko, the grandmother of the children, resided next door and went to check on them because they had not responded to her calls. When she arrived, she discovered all 4 members of the Miyazawa family dead, with the son having been stabbed and the other 3 having been strangled. Nevertheless, the most unsettling aspect is that the murderer remained in the house of the family for several hours after committing the murders. It was reported by ABC Australia that he left his DNA everywhere. At the scene, he left his clothing behind. He abandoned the weapon used in the murder. It was the victim's computer that he used. The freezer contained at least 4 ice creams, all of which he consumed. Even though more than 250,000 investigators have been working on this case, it has not been solved even after 20 years have passed. Number 5. The strange condition that Pauline Piccard fell into. During April in the year 1922, a young girl who was staying with her parents on their farm vanished from the small French village of Goz-al-Ludu. Because the search had been fruitless, the family eventually concluded that she had been taken captive. The situation remained unchanged until a young girl who matched Pauline's description was discovered wandering in Cherbourg, which is located 400 kilometers distant. After making the trip, the family was able to recognize the young lady as Pauline and have her accompany them back to their house. The peculiar thing, on the other hand, was that the girl did not appear to recognize the mother and father. Pauline stayed mute when she was talked to in Breton, a language that she was familiar with and spoke. However, the answers to several of these queries were sent approximately 1 month later. According to a report that was published in 1922 by the New York Times, a farmer located approximately 1 mile away from the town where the family lived discovered the death of a young girl who was naked and had her clothes folded neatly nearby. Even though the body was unrecognizable, the mother observed that the clothing was the same ones that Pauline had been wearing on the day that she vanished. Nevertheless, the discovery raised more questions than it addressed before it was completed. Just what took place with Pauline? To whom did she die? Lastly, who was the young lady whom they brought back to their house? Number 4. The Voynich Manuscript. The manuscript was composed in Central Europe sometime between the 15th and 16th centuries, and it is currently housed in the Unusual Book Collection at Yale University. In addition to being written in a script that cannot be deciphered, it is presumed to be of a scientific or magical nature. According to Yale, the manuscript appears to be divided into 6 sections: drawings of astronomical and astrological objects, drawings of unidentified plant species, drawings of biology, which primarily depicts women with swollen stomachs, immersed or wading in fluids, and oddly interacting with interconnecting tubes and capsules, 9 cosmological medallions, drawings of medicinal herbs, and lengthy pages of text that are believed to be recipes. The text may be a fake, but if it is, it would be a very intricate deception, considering that it was believed to have been written by anywhere from 2 to 8 authors and that it took years to finish. Even though the text has been passed down from several owners, including Emperor Rudolf II of Germany, the mystery of what it is and what it is saying has not yet been solved. The Lady of the Dunes is the 3rd number. A woman's body was discovered at Race Point Beach in Provincetown, Massachusetts on July 26, 1974. The event took place in the year 1974. In addition to a blue bandana and a pair of folded jeans, she was lying on a beach towel with her head resting on top of the folded trousers. The woman, who had been missing her hands and had been suspected of having been there for somewhere between 10 days and 3 weeks, had nearly completely lost her head and was missing her hands. It seemed unusual that nobody was able to recognize her in such a small town with such a strong sense of community. Following the discovery that she had substantial dental work done in a New York style, the investigators disseminated information about the work to every dentist in the state, as well as to several dentistry publications and government agencies. However, no one was able to identify either the woman or the treatment. No matter what information they were able to glean from the woman, they were never able to get any closer to determining who she was. This marked the beginning of a pattern that would continue throughout the investigation. Exhumations of her body were performed 3 times to collect blood samples, a bust of her face, bone fragment testing, and DNA samples. However, none of these procedures were successful in determining the identity of the deceased. The question of who she was and what exactly occurred to her has, of course, given rise to a great number of hypotheses. Her death at the hands of a serial murderer or a mafia is just one of the many possibilities. She may even be a criminal herself. Nevertheless, one of the most infamous ideas originates from Stephen King's son, who, while viewing Jaws, observed an extra who appeared to be extremely similar to the sketch composite of the Isdal woman. However, this theory has since gained widespread notoriety. To add insult to injury, she was seen in the area wearing jeans and a blue bandana, which were identical to the ones that the victim was discovered underneath. Unfortunately, though, Universal Studios didn't have any record of the extra, and it is nonetheless still only a theory. The Circleville Letters is on number 2. Beginning in the late 1970s and continuing into the middle of the 1990s, inhabitants of the community of Circleville, Ohio, were subjected to letters that were inexplicable and unknown. The person who wrote these handwritten notes accused the individuals of being unfaithful, engaging in domestic violence, stealing money, and even committing murder. An example of this would be the author's accusation that a local school bus driver named Mary Gillespie had an affair with the superintendent of the school, Gordon Massey. Several letters containing threats were sent to Mary and her husband on the matter. It is said that her husband received a phone call from the author in August of 1977. On the same day, his automobile collided with a tree, which led to his death, which can be interpreted as suspicious. After a few months had passed, the author struck once more when Mary came across an obscene sign about her 13-year-old child. She attempted to rip down the sign, and as she was doing so, she saw a box attached to it. She subsequently discovered that the box had a booby-trapped rifle that was ready to go off. Paul Frischauer, who is Mary's brother-in-law, was the property owner of the firearm. Paul was tried for attempted murder and was found guilty of the crime. The letters continued to arrive even though he had been incarcerated for 10 years, during which time he was not permitted to use pens or paper. At long last, they came to an end in 1994, when Paul was finally set free. It is still uncertain who the author is. Number 1. The murders known as the Monster of Florence. There was a serial killer who operated in Florence, Italy, throughout the 1970s and 1980s. It is believed that he was responsible for the deaths of at least 16 people. An overwhelming majority of the victims were couples, and they were either stabbed or shot with a Beretta pistol, as reported by CBS News. 6 of the couples were murdered while they were traveling in their vehicles, with the majority of the murders taking place either during or after the couples had sexual encounters. The true stories of the Monster of Florence claims that one of the final known victims, Nadine Moriat, had her breast cut off and shipped along with a letter to the state prosecutor. Other victims had their genitals hacked out, and some of the victims had their breasts cut off. Even though 5 individuals were accused of the crime, and one of them even confessed to it, another murder took place while each of them was incarcerated. Even though many of the victims' families want the investigation to be reopened, the case has not been solved to this day. So this is the end of our today's video. Do you like it? Kindly give your valuable response in our comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more interesting and informative videos.